These, I forget, raspberries where they detach and blackberries where they don't. I'm pretty sure these are blackberries here. But anyway, these could be raspberries and blackberries. They're easy to identify. The leaves, though, are actually my favorite part of the blackberry plant. Just you have to pick so many berries for it to amount to anything, so we just grow berries at our homestead because, you know, they're that big and you can pick a cupful of them real quick whenever we want to cook with them. But the leaves, I think, are the best part. Leaves make a lovely tea off of blackberries and raspberry plants, so I really am quite fond of those. What I am really happy to see up in here, though, we have a number of other things. This right here, this is one of the latucas, or wild lettuce. Just because it's called a lettuce doesn't mean it's edible. And there are lots and lots of wild lettuces, and like mints, they hybridize very easily. And sometimes they can be mildly toxic because the tannins in particular just get to be so dense, and sometimes they're really good. So really the only way to try to see if any one that you have is going to be a good one is to sample the taste. And if the taste is mild, you can, mildly bitter like lettuce is, you can use it. If it's not, you shouldn't use it. You'll get latucas with these deeply lobed leaves like these. Sometimes you see them where the leaves are heavily, they're not so deeply lobed, like these here. Which you have doesn't really matter because in the end you have to sample them all because they do hybridize so easily. Latucas are widely known though for other reasons besides food. You can make a tea out of them, and it's hideously bitter. There's no getting around that. But you can make a pain-killing tea out of this. Now, personally, I'd rather use bark of alder or willow to make a pain-killing tea. But you can use these. These actually have a mild form of opiate in them. I saw one of those clickbait articles on Facebook a few days ago. It said it was a secret opium. Well, it's not even close. You'd have to have a truckload of this to get that kind of dosage. You'd have to literally eat a truckload of it. But it is a mild opiate. It's not even as effective as aspirin. But you can use it as a painkiller, but honestly there are better things. If you don't have alder or willow or asper tree or something nearby, you can make do with this. It will be terribly bitter and you won't want to use it if you don't have to. And if you happen to get a mild one, you grab the whole bunch and use it as lettuce. It is a wild lettuce. Dandelion also is a cousin of wild lettuce. I mean, they're very hard to tell apart. The main way you tell them apart is one, dandelion, the blossoms always come up. This is an identification trait. The blossoms in dandelions, you always have one blossom per stalk. And sometimes with wild lettuces you have more. And the other is that dandelion's a very early season, one of the first things we see in spring, whereas the latucas come up later. This here, anybody know this plant? This is primrose here. Evening primrose. So primrose has a number of uses. One, you can dig up the root under there, which we won't be able to do because I don't have a shovel and this ground is too hard. It's going to have a little tuber underneath. And the tuber has kind of a potato-like quality. However, there are problems with it, and I don't advise people to get into primroses because there are poisonous plants around here that you need to get primrose tubers when the primrose is very young, and they can be very difficult unless they happen to form a distinctive rosette, which they don't often do around here. They can be difficult to decipher from some poisonous things. If a plant is poisonous, the poisons will typically be concentrated in the underground tubers, so you have to be very careful with that. But something that primroses do offer is these nice blossoms, and I really like these blossoms. You just pluck off these blossoms and eat them. They're very good, and you can pick out those petals and throw them on tons of salads for color and such. During the day, as you can see, they're going to close up. They're semi-open right now because it's a cloudy day. If it's a sunny day, they close up tightly. In the evening, they open up right out. And so it's a nice plant, and it has other uses too. This here is one of my all-time favorites, and we actually still have some late season blossoms on it. Anybody know this plant?
St. John's wort?
St. John's wort. So you can make a tea out of this plant. This plant is clinically proven to treat depression, especially seasonal affective disorder, if you have a daily tea of this. Some people are sensitive to this plant, I'll warn you, and so you have to be careful with topical application. If you crush it up and get the plant on your skin, it will emulate a sunburn. It's almost like drinking, it's been described and very accurately as like drinking sunlight. So you have to be somewhat careful with this plant. Now there are all kinds of ways to identify St. John's wort. One, and this is one of the things you need to watch for with plant identification. Most books will focus on the blossoms, by the way. If the book focuses on the blossoms, you want a different book. The blossoms are part of identification, but most plants aren't in blossom all that long in their life cycle. You need to know stem type and shape. You need to know shapes of stems. You need to know shapes of leaves. St. John's wort leaves are always this kind of oblong, ovular, without points. Very small. They also, if you'll pass this around, look through those leaves at the sky. What do you see? Just hold it in front of your eye. You have to hold it close and look through the leaves at the sky.
Little holes or...
Tiny little pinholes, huh?
Yeah.
Like it's been punched with a pin. Very distinctive for St. John's wort.
Oh yeah.
With my glasses, without my glasses, probably not.
In fact, a common name for this particular St. John's wort is pinhole St. John's wort, or perforated St. John's wort. Now, there's another, I think, even much more important and distinctive feature for St. John's wort, though I also think the ability to observe this trait is genetic, because some people I teach courses to cannot seem to detect it at all. But I'm just going to roll this up in my hand. Here, take that and smell it. And crush it up in your hand and then give it a whiff. What does it smell like?
Oh, yeah.
You might want to crush it up a bit more. Don't smell anything?
I smell something, but I...
Crush it up really good. And then put it on the back of your hand so you're not just smelling the chlorophyll. That's the distinctive vegetative odor. Don't get it?
I can smell something, but I can't tell you.
Boy, to me it's just clear as a bell, but that could be years and years of practice. I'm pretty sure it is genetic, and I don't know what percentage of people. It's like almonds. One in 3 people can smell, cyanide. For 1 in 3 people, cyanide smells like almond, and it's a genetic trait. You either have the gene to pick it up or not.
Yeah.
It's fruity. Fruity. Yep.
Apple.
That fruitiness. And I've never seen that fruitiness mentioned in one field guide ever, but it is very powerfully fruity, and the closer to spring you are, the more distinctively fruity it is. So if you find, you see that plant with little oval leaves, and you give it a little crush and smell it. I used to, before I knew what the identification of this plant was, I used to just grab it and crush it up and sniff it while I was out hiking in the woods and stuff, just because it smells so nice.
Yeah.
Distinctive fruitiness, very nice.
I've already touched it.
Goldenrod. Does everybody hate this plant?
No.
No? A lot of people do. Why?
I'm very allergic to it.
Yep. Hay fever, right? Here's an interesting fact. Goldenrod doesn't cause hay fever. That's a myth. There is another plant that blooms at the same time as goldenrod, and it has a very, very fine pollen that's almost microscopic. People aren't aware of it, but it's what causes hay fever. Goldenrod has been framed. It's not your enemy. But before goldenrod comes into bloom, these leaves are young and tender, and you can eat these. They are kind of tough, so you want to cook these down first. So it's nice that way. And these flowers themselves are also useful. You can take these flowers and use them fresh, or you can dry them and save them, but they make a nice tea. It tastes very similar to dandelion tea. If you've ever made dandelion tea out of the blossoms, it has that kind of, it's hard to describe, I find it's a bit of a thick and heady flavor. I find it has a bit too much body for me. I have tried it. I'm not super crazy about it, but I have friends that love it and drink it all the time. Eating stuff, but in the trees. But yeah, goldenrod's a great plant, and it's a useful vegetable, and it's a useful form of tea for you, and it grows right near you usually, and you don't have to hate it, and you don't have to destroy it, because it is not what's causing your hay fever. You might have an allergy, a particular allergy, but as far as hay fever, goldenrod is neutral.
It also makes a beautiful yellow dye. Goldenrod.
Does it?
Yep.
That's something I didn't know.
I hang around with a lot of people who do natural dyeing. What is that, Claire?
This here?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get into this one. You don't know this one, honestly?
Is it a chokecherry?
Does everybody know this one? Choke cherries. Yep. Are these edible? Yes, they are.
Just make your mouth feel really dry.
In fact, well, yeah, they do have that tackiness. It's a form of tannin. I think it's tannin B, but don't quote me on that. It's a form of tannin that causes that tackiness on the tongue. Now, you can reduce that tackiness by picking a bunch of these and then freezing them. We make jams out of these all the time. And what we do is we separate the berries, and then we freeze them, and then we thaw them, and then my wife juices them and makes her jellies and jams and things. But yeah, they are quite good. And that tackiness is kind of an acquired taste like wine. You get used to it. You like it. It does. But if, I think you also get immune to the tackiness, because I've been eating these for years and my tongue doesn't really get tacky to these anymore. Used to terribly, it just doesn't happen anymore. But they are quite good. And it's often amazed me that Nova Scotians don't know what these are, or they think that they are poisonous. Now again, we live way in a homestead, way back in the woods, almost as remote as you can get in Nova Scotia. And we have a lot of these growing around our homesteads, but I mean, I forage all the time. If I have to go to town and I see a tree laden with these things, I'll stop and I'll pick these things. And you'd be amazed, seeds. You'd be amazed how many times I've stopped and picked these things and somebody comes running here. You can't pick those, they're poisonous. They really aren't. I had one lady about 3 or 4 years ago get into an argument. My grandma told me they're poisonous. They really aren't. She said they're dead. I'm sorry, but she might have been your grandmother, but she's wrong. They're not poisonous. They're not poisonous. In fact, we have 3 kinds of wild cherries in Nova Scotia. We have pin cherries, choke cherries, and black cherries. Pin cherries, you know, the main way to tell them apart once they're in fruiting, pin cherries are fairly small, hence the name pin, like pinhead. Choke cherry. These actually might be black cherries. Like black cherries and choke cherries can be kind of hard to tell as they get older. My glasses are dark. Yeah, these are actually, I think, going to turn into be black cherries. But the black cherries are the biggest and the plumpest. Choke cherries are very similar. They just have more of a red coloration. But they really are good. And you've got these growing all around here. Now, the thing to know with cherries, things like raspberries, you can make tea from the leaves. And I even saw some strawberry leaves, wild strawberry leaves down here somewhere. I'll spot them again in a bit. But, okay. So yeah, you can make lovely teas from the strawberry leaves as well, anytime in their life cycle. Not with cherries though. Cherry leaves have cyanide in the leaves. There was somebody who was doing an informational video on YouTube. Be careful with the YouTube videos. Make sure of the background of the person you're taking info from. Was doing this video. He was walking through a park or a campground. It was spring. And he was doing a course on how to forage, supposedly, and he was saying, you know, the beautiful thing about spring is all trees are edible, all the leaves are edible. It's like, man, thank God he's not chewing leaves off an elderberry or a cherry tree, because they're not edible. They actually have cyanide in them. I'm not sure how many leaves you would have to eat. I don't think a leaf or 2 would kill you. You might not even notice it, but they do have cyanide in them. So just be sure of the backgrounds that you're getting into before you eat them. Anybody, we're going to pass by other cherries. If anybody wants to give them a try, they really are quite good. And I presume I went looking for what they thought might be it, and I think that this is what they found. This is not elderberry. So, and those plants taste, those berries taste pretty terrible, so don't get into them.
And they're not edible.
I don't know the idea of this plant, but you know, there's an interesting thing you should know with plants. There's nothing set in stone. Nothing applies to every case, but usually with plants, if it is poisonous, it will taste foul. If you taste it and it's poisonous, it means do not eat it. There are some exceptions, and there are some plants like water hemlock and poison hemlock where they are so poisonous you don't want to taste test those, because one little tiny leaf is enough to kill you. In fact, water hemlock and poison hemlock have a neurotoxin, and you can actually absorb it through your skin. When I get into serious studies of plant toxicology with students, I always wear surgical gloves when handling those, and then the tools that I use, I burn them. I set them in fire to totally oxidize the materials that are on those things. But they have a tuber underneath them that looks like, and in fact is a parsnip. Parsnips are an interesting plant family because some things are edible and delicious, and some things are utterly deadly. The deadliest plants in the world are in the parsnip family. And so it has this parsnip underneath it that smells like a carrot, and if you cut it, it'll exude oil, a yellowish oil, and that yellowish oil is the neurotoxin that makes water hemlock and poison hemlock so deadly, and it will absorb through your skin. It is a very serious neurotoxin. It doesn't take much. Like one of those roots could probably kill 10 cattle. It's extreme. One of those little roots, it's extremely toxic. What? Leaves, big broad leaves. Does anybody know this plant?
Colt's foot.
Colt's foot, exactly. What's colt's foot good for? Anybody know?
Magnesium.
Magnesium, yeah. But what are its uses? Does anybody know its uses? It's not toxic, and it can be used when it's young and tender. You can cook it, throw it in a stew or whatnot. It's not a great plant. On a scale of 1 to 10 taste-wise, I'd call this a 1.5. It's something you use if you need food. It will not give you much in the way of calories, but it will give you nutrition. An old use for colt's foot that is true if the ground has any sodium chloride or salt in it. Coltsfoot is a salt sponge. It loves salt and it soaks in salt. So in the old days, when the pioneers would come through, and I've heard the Aboriginals have done it too, I don't know for sure, but they would collect coltsfoot and then they burn it to ash, and you can put the ash in your food, and there's your salt. It's a way to get salt away from the sea. Now, let's find out if this stuff is salty or not, because you can taste it right on the leaf if it is. Not much salt in the ground around here. Coltsfoot has other uses. It's widely used throughout Europe, and I think it's starting to become popular in North America for treating coughs. It is quite mucilaginous. If you take one of these leaves, you have to vivisect it with a scalpel, and I don't have anything that sharp, but if you were to separate the leaf and feel the inside, it's really mucilaginous, which is to say it's slimy, kind of mucousy. And if you just crush it in your hand like this, you can feel it getting slippery. You're getting a little bit of that mucilaginous texture. So you extract that mucilaginity and mix it into honey and eat that, and it's an excellent cough treatment. Really, really good cough treatment. So it's good for salt, good for food, good as a cough treatment, and that's something that I should have saved for the medicine class tonight. We'll go back over that.
Now, some of the times you see them, they got all this hair on them. Does that matter?
No. Hair? Are you talking about just the fuzziness on the stem?
A lot of times I see it up on the top of the leaf.
You have to show me. That might be some local fungus.
I do have a question. Concerning identification, what's the difference between this and burdock?
Burdock's very different. If we see some, I'll show you.
Okay.
Yeah, you can. Burdock will.
Well,
among other things, burdock. These are petioles. The part of the stem looks like a stem that connects to the leaf. That's called a petiole. Burdock's petioles are very substantial. They're rounded underneath, more flattish on top. They come in to be larger. They also get quite reddish. And they have a film on the outside. Burdock is unbelievably bitter. It is technically edible, and the Japanese eat it. I don't know how. It is one of the bitterest things on earth. In fact, it is the way it got to, it's not actually native to North America. It was brought here from Japan and then just spread everywhere like Japanese knotweed. Fortunately, burdock has other redeeming qualities like its roots and its medicinal qualities. But these petioles have a substance on the outside, and it's the concentrated bitterness of the plant. And if you feel it, you can actually scrape it off of there, whereas you don't have anything to scrape off of here. If we come across them, we'll take a closer look at it, because it's a really good plant to know.
I almost thought this was a sarsaparilla,
Yeah.
but it's not.
No, so I'll go over just as curiosities. Well, I just stopped here because we have some nice large latuca here. These are good examples of latuca. So here you have a deeply lobed latuca leaf, and here you have one that's not deeply, so these are lobes, and this is not deeply lobed. You have false or soft teeth on the leaves. That's it. And again, you just have to try them to see if they're edible, if that's what you're looking for. If you're interested in a painkiller, I mean, if you do hurt yourself in the bush, you can just chew these and swallow them. And it will help you at least until you can make a tea out of something better, like alder or willow, especially willow.
Supposed to talk about medicine.
What's up?
Is there any medicinal values with sorrel? Or is it just...
You see sorrel down here? Oh yeah, there it is. We'll get into that tonight. Thanks for reminding me. But sorrel's a great one to know. Here, I crushed it up because I was going to eat it. I'm so used to eating this stuff. It's so good.
Oh, I love this stuff.
All right, so this is field sorrel. It likes light more. It has a twin that looks almost exactly like this, except a more colorful blossom. And it's white and kind of a magenta hue and sort of striped vertically. It's very interesting. And anyway, sorrel's an awesome plant because it tastes lemony, very, very lemony. And at our homestead, we always try to cook locally. We try to stick with foods that we have, but we do like Asian foods, and it's too cold. We're up in the highlands of Nova Scotia at the top. We're one of the highest points in Nova Scotia. And so we're 2 gardening zones higher than here. We're equal to southern Newfoundland. So we can't get lemongrass to grow at all, so we use this stuff. It takes this place quite fine. I'll go ahead and pass it around and just taste it. You can just pick the leaves.